The local share market falls to a new 11-month low. Aussie cattle prices tumble as El Niño looms, and France focuses on a new enemy ahead of next year's Olympic Games, bedbugs. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It is Thursday, the 5th of October, 2023. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. I love the way you say I'd say El Nino, but you say it like El Nino.
Yes. I have been studying, and you know how in this business, when we are doing a podcast, suddenly there's a lot of emphasis on getting pronunciations right.
Yeah.
I reckon we get about 9 out of 10 incorrect. And if I can just get 1 out of 10, and that is El Nino, then you know what? I'm happy.
France or France?
Oh, I've always been a France person until I listened back to myself going, goodness me, I sound like a bogan. So I changed it to France. And it makes me a better class of person, I believe, now.
Yeah. Talking about classy people, our interview today, Michael.
Oh, fantastic chat with Stefan von Imhoff from alts.co.
Yes, like an alternate investing group. And we talk about investing in music, like in streaming services. We don't have Bowie bonds. David Bowie was really a pioneer in creating, securitizing a future income stream, which really set the world alight on how, as an investor, you can invest in music. It's fascinating. All sorts of new ways also for small investors to get a piece of the audio world. One of the funnest chats I've had for a long time.
I was going to say, Stefan is a fantastic communicator, and this is probably one of the best interviews you've done this year. So definitely stick around for this one. It's coming up a little bit later on. We've got a fair bit to cover before then, though, Sean, because the main story this morning is a big one. The ASX 200 closed at a new 11-month low yesterday as rising bond yields in the US and locally play havoc on equities and the Aussie dollar.
Yes, the market closed down at 0.8% yesterday to 6,890 points, levels last seen in November last year. Forget just the last 24 hours. Think of the last few weeks. Some very big companies have recorded some very big falls. Commonwealth Bank is down 8% since late July, reflecting uncertainty in the economy and squeezing of profit margins. Macquarie Group's down around 12% in that period. Energy giant Woodside is off 10% since its most recent peak, although Santos, its competitor, has fared better. In mid-June, Blood Plasma Group CSL announced disappointing profit guidance with margins under pressure. Its share price is down nearly 20% since then. That's massive. BHP's relatively flat, doing better than most other mega caps, while fellow iron ore giant FMG, Fortescue Metals Group, is down 12% since it spiked in late July. Now, an exception to the rule is Wesfarmers, which has jumped 7% in the past 6 weeks after its better-than-expected earnings announcement. Fellow retailer Woolworths is off 5%, and Qantas' share price fell another 1% yesterday, hitting a new 11-month low. The carrier share price is off 27% since June 1. Now, that's the day that former Chief Executive Alan Joyce sold 2.5 million shares. It's mostly about bond yields, though not always, since Qantas, for example, has plenty of other stuff going on. Yields are used to value equities and other asset classes. In this instance, yields are rising fast, effectively devaluing equities. Yields on 10-year bonds are heading towards 5% in Australia. In the US, long-term bond yields have risen sharply. In short, high US bond yields make the US bond market more attractive than pretty much anywhere else to invest. The casualties, equities, and currencies as well.
All right. You mentioned, Sean, the Aussie dollar. Why has that been hit?
Well, the Aussie dollar has been hit really hard by these high US bond yields, along with plenty of global uncertainty, relatively low local interest rates compared to overseas at least, and the pullback in commodity prices. The Aussie dollar is at an 11-month low against the greenback of around 63 US cents. It's down about 8% since July. Against the euro, the Aussie dollar is off its lows of mid-August, but only just, and 100 Aussie dollars is buying just 60 euros. Against the yen, which is important because Japan buys a truckload of local commodities, the Aussie dollar is actually relatively strong, buying about 94 yen. Now might be the time to take a holiday to Tokyo, Michael. And against the UK pound, the Aussie dollar is trading around 52 pence. These levels are around the lowest in 3 years. Against all of Australia's trading partners, something called the trade weighted index, the Aussie's down about 4% in the past few months.
All right, then looking ahead, Sean, will bond yields keep rising?
It's really about US bond yields. They dominate the rest of the market and there's still upward pressure. For example, in the past 24 hours, there were figures out that showed stronger than expected US job openings. More jobs suggests the economy is going well. That puts pressure on the Federal Reserve to lift interest rates again. That pushes up bond yields. Wall Street felt that yesterday. It fell to a 4-month low. So, US bond yields will eventually fall, but there's just no sign of that happening anytime soon, Michael.
It's a pretty special day, isn't it, Sean, when you get the main story, local markets and international markets all rolled into one.
All in one.
Oh,
very exciting.
It's a bumper start to the show. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Australian cattle prices have fallen to their lowest level in about 9 years and are likely to fall further ahead of drier weather following the onset of El Niño.
The Eastern Young Cattle Indicator, one of my faves, the Eastern Young Cattle Indicator.
The EYCI.
Yeah, has slumped almost 60% this year, and yesterday was near the lowest since December 2014, according to Bloomberg. The total number of cattle has soared over the last 3 years. Plenty of rain, plenty of feed, therefore farmers have been happy to restock. But with September the driest on record, and El Niño, is that the right way to say it, Michael? El Niño?
It sounds pretty good to me.
Well, El Niño expected to persist until at least the end of February. Farmers are basically getting ready to sell that stock and not restock, because if they don't have feed, no point in having cattle. The influx of cheaper Australian beef should allow farmers to recapture some market share in key Asian markets, such as Japan and South Korea. Might also be good news at the grocery store when you go to buy a steak.
I was going to ask you because beef prices in the supermarket have been pretty extraordinary, and it's become just another one of those elements of the cost of living crisis. So hopefully we may see a little bit of easing of pressure there.
Now, Michael, I know you grew up in the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was yours a lamb chops, chump chops, and a couple of veggies type household?
Oh, absolutely. 4-quarter chops.
4-quarter chops, right?
Yeah. No, the 4-quarter chops are the best because they are they're usually the cheapest, of course.
Yeah,
but
naturally.
They've also got the most flavour because they've got so much fat throughout them.
So much fat through them. Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah. I mean, how long since you've bought a lamb chop?
A very long time,
yeah.
Actually.
Yes.
It has just been really expensive. Even 4-quarter chops have become kind of prime.
Yeah, they are what the cutlet used to be.
Oh, yeah. That's a good marketing campaign, isn't it? 4-quarter chops, the new cutlet.
The new cutlet. I wonder if it'll fly.
Never thought we'd see the day. Now, Sean, Australia is suffering the worst skills shortage in 6 decades, according to the boss Jobs and Skills Australia, with more than 1/3 of occupations experiencing shortages.
In fact, it's 36% of all occupations, and Jobs and Skills Australia put out a list yesterday and just went on and on and on. Now, the boss, Peter Dawkins, called on the Reserve Bank to not only bring down inflation, but also work hard to match workforce skills with industry needs, improving gender balance in the professions with the most severe worker shortages, things like technicians and trade workers, health professionals, various types of engineers, is critical, he said. The Jobs and Skills Australia recommends that the government adopt broad strategies that straddle vocational education, higher education and migration to ensure new graduates and workers have the skills employers need.
Migration agents working on behalf of temporary workers seeking to come to Australia will face tough new background and character checks, Sean, as part of the Albanese government's crackdown on the exploitation of visa holders.
A report for the federal government by former Victoria Police Chief Commissioner Christine Nixon, released yesterday, found, and I quote, grotesque abuses in the system, including commonplace sexual exploitation, human trafficking, and other organised crime. According to the Financial Review, Labor will spend an immediate $50 million on integration of intelligence, investigations and integrity work at the Department of Home Affairs, warning that the processes and procedures governing those who could enter the country were fundamentally broken and open to systemic abuse. Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill announced plans to double the number of staff overseeing regulations for migration agents and significant increases in financial penalties for misconduct. Currently, the rules allow for up to 10 years imprisonment, fines of about $16,500 for breaches. That's way below penalties in countries like Canada, New Zealand and Britain.
Now, this is an interesting one, Sean. Westpac has reversed a decision to withdraw from the South Pacific yesterday, saying that it wants to retain ownership of Westpac Bank PNG and Westpac Fiji.
The bank's been trying to sell the assets, including a $420 million sale of the P&G business 2 years ago that was knocked back by the competition regulator. The federal government's been calling on Australian companies to play a role in the region. You might remember Telstra invested in the South Pacific last year. Now, in part, that's about dampening the influence of Chinese groups in the South Pacific. Westpac now says the region can play a bigger role in its future.
Well, we love talking about deals and big deals here on Fear and Greed, Sean, but one deal announced earlier in the year that just really fallen off the radar is Vocus Group's bid for some $6 billion of TPG's fibre assets. Well, apparently talks are continuing.
Yeah, so the original announcement was a couple of months ago, and Vocus was granted a due diligence period. Now, that expired, having been extended once already. Yesterday, TPG said talks between the two parties are continuing, and any transaction involves considerable complexity, no doubt. Media reports say the two companies are still negotiating which assets would be included in a potential sale and how any sale would impact commercial arrangements.
Western Australia's resources sector is bracing for chaos ahead of a pilot strike that's expected to affect thousands of fly-in, fly-out workers and has sparked claims as well that it could actually discourage overseas investment in the state.
Pilots employed by a Qantas subsidiary, Network Aviation, plan to walk off the job for 24 hours over a long-running pay dispute. The protected industrial action has resulted in about 50% of scheduled flights being cancelled as the airline scrambles to find alternatives. That includes rerouting Qantas 737 jets, using aircraft from other charter operators, and moving flights to other days. BHP, Rio Tinto and Fortescue Metals have all come out and said their operations will be impacted by the strike. They're working to minimise disruption. Now, wage negotiations between Network Aviation and its pilots have pretty much been at a standstill since March.
How about this, Sean? The Victorian government spent nearly $1.3 million on lawyers to handle the fallout from its decision to axe the Commonwealth Games.
Law firm Arnold Bloch Liebler charged $1,265,982 for legal services regarding withdrawal from hosting 2026 Commonwealth Games. According to documents, the work began in June, while former Premier Daniel Andrews announced his decision on July 18. He said costs had blown out from $2.6 billion to up to $7 billion. That's in terms of hosting the Games. The government eventually paid out $380 million to Commonwealth Games bodies in compensation. And, as you said, $1.3 million on lawyers about how to handle that decision.
Every single number in this story is huge.
Oh, it's incredible. Just a really bad decision up front, really.
Oh, and just, you know that those numbers, when we're talking about costs blowing out from $2.6 billion to $7 billion, you know they're big when you don't even kind of blink at $1.3 million just on lawyers to unravel that.
Yeah, I know.
Goodness me. Now, finally, the crisis in Tasmanian state politics, which could have seen the only Liberal leader in the country, Jeremy Rockliff, ousted, has somewhat subsided.
Yes, looking better for Mr. Rockliff. Tasmania's former Attorney General, Elise Archer, yesterday said she will quit politics, ending a stalemate that could have forced the state's minority Liberal government to an early election. Archer was sacked from cabinet on Friday amid allegations of workplace bullying and for sending inappropriate messages. Archer's decision to quit Parliament will prompt a recount in her seat of clerk. Now, that's likely to be won by a Liberal. That means the Tasmanian government will hold 11 of the 25 lower house seats, which is what they held before Archer's sacking, means they will probably be able to continue as a minority government.
Now, in international news, a truly remarkable story out of the US where the House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy yesterday became the first speaker in history to be voted out of the top job after members of his own Republican Party actually sided with the Democrats to dump him.
Yes, there's been a couple of speakers who have left of their own volition, but this is the first time someone's been voted out. Now, of course, the Speaker of the House, the lower house, he's the person in charge of the Republican or Democrat Party with the majority. So when you have the majority, you don't expect to be voted out. Anyway, a lot of Republicans were very upset that McCarthy worked with Democrats last week to push through a bill that avoided a US government shutdown. His chief rival, Florida Congressman and Donald Trump supporter Matt Gaetz, brought forward a motion to vacate the Speaker's chair. It was supported by 11 hard right conservatives and, of course, all the Democrats. He was voted out. McCarthy, was voted out 216 to 210. He says he won't run again. The Speaker is among the most senior positions in US politics, certainly one of the most powerful positions, overseeing the lower house. His defeat pretty much pushes the Republican leadership into chaos, which won't help their chances in next year's election. Of course, sitting above all this, Donald Trump. Donald Trump could theoretically become Speaker of the House. I'm sure he wouldn't do it, but it doesn't have to be an elected member.
Imagine the theatre.
Imagine.
But isn't that story just extraordinary? The fact that he was essentially punished for helping to avoid a government shutdown.
Yeah. You wonder whether this backfires on the Republicans.
Oh, this is going to be a fascinating one just to watch the rest of this unfold, because clearly it is not over.
398 days to the election, Michael.
Oh, someone's counting. The trial of cryptocurrency identity Sam Bankman-Fried has kicked off in New York. The 31-year-old co-founder of crypto exchange FTX is accused of fraud.
Yes, jury selection took place. It took a couple of days, and a noticeably leaner Bankman-Fried, of course famous for his pretty crazy hair, has been in court. His FTX crypto empire collapsed in November last year. He was arrested a month later in the Bahamas, accused of bilking investors and customers out of billions of dollars, allegations he denies. Essentially, prosecutors say money invested in FTX was diverted for other uses. For his part, Bankman-Fried says he is a well-intentioned, albeit poor, CEO who made huge mistakes but never knowingly committed fraud.
And finally, Sean, France. I'm going to have to go back to France. It feels like I'm being dishonest by saying France. I've always said France, so I'm just going to stick with it. Anyway, the French country is currently hosting the Rugby World Cup, of course, and Paris is preparing to host the Olympic Games next year. But there's been a rush of bedbug sightings, triggering a political and PR nightmare. Now, Sean, you have just been there.
Been itching ever since.
I was wondering, have you got a few little bites and a few little kind of...
No, not that I'm aware of. But I mean, this is the last thing you want. Basically, videos on social media appear to show the blood-sucking insects crawling over seats on the Paris metro and on a high-speed train. This is according to a report in Bloomberg. Some metro passengers are now vowing to never sit down on the metros, to remain standing. Public transport operator RATP, which runs Paris's subway, trams and buses, said it had investigated, but no cases of bedbugs have been confirmed to date. Prime Minister Elizabeth Bourne said the government's working to find long-term solutions for detecting infestations and supporting those affected, while the Health Ministry recommends that travellers inspect hotel beds and be careful when purchasing used furniture or mattresses. Indeed, who wants to go to a city full of bedbugs?
I love the fact that, though, that this is on the Paris metro and a high-speed train. It's like, newsflash, public transport is not particularly clean.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview with Stefan von Imhoff from alts.co.
All about investing in music and some new regulations in the US that actually makes it a lot easier for smaller investors to do so. Well worth a listen.
It is fascinating because you've seen artists selling the rights to their catalogs for hundreds of millions of dollars. And I love the way Stefan just explains all of that. It is such a fascinating space and a great interview. It's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
Look at you. You are itching now, aren't you?
I am itching. It's one of those things when someone near you yawns, you start yawning. When you start talking about bedbugs and itching, you start itching.
You just can't stop yourself. It is Thursday, the 5th of October, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great day.